Hello and good day. For today, our topic is credit fundamentals. Credit fundamentals is the first topic in credit and collection. And in credit fundamentals, we will deal or study the basic concepts of credit, specifically the meaning of credit and the importance of credit. Let us now start by defining credit or knowing the meaning of credit. Unahin natin yung pinakasimple at pinakamadaling definition. The easiest and simplest definition is that credit is an arrangement to receive cash, goods, or services now and pay for them later. It says here in the definition that credit is an arrangement. Kapag sinabing arrangement, there is an agreement and transaction between two parties or two persons. Yung isang party, makaka-receive siya ng cash, goods, or services, at yung isang party naman, magli-lend siya ng cash, goods, or services. At the same time, isa pa sa kanilang agreement is that hindi muna babayaran yung cash, goods, or services na na-receive ng isang party or isang person. That means hindi muna siya magbabayad ng cash or any other resources. Pero kung hindi muna siya magbabayad ngayon ng cash, that person must still pay for the cash, goods, or services na na-receive niya in the future. In a credit, wala munang lalabas na resources or money or cash. Pero, kailangan magbayad pa rin yung nakareceive ng cash, goods, or services in the future. That is basically the meaning of credit. And again, that is the easiest and simplest definition of credit. In a business, credit is viewed differently. It depends upon the viewpoint of the lender, and it also depends upon the viewpoint of the borrower. Here, there are two parties involved, at yung parties na yan ay lender at borrower. To a lender, it connotes trust on the borrower's capacity and willingness to pay. That means, kaya nagpapautang ang lender kasi alam niya na makakabayad ang borrower in the future. There is a trust given by the lender to the borrower. How about yung viewpoint ng borrower? To a borrower, it is the ability to obtain goods or services in exchange for a promise to pay. Para kay borrower, kaya siya mag-a-acquire or bibili ng goods at mag-e-enjoy ng services kasi merong agreement between the borrower and lender na dapat si borrower magbayad in the future. Kasi kung si borrower wala siyang promise to pay, that means hindi na matatawag na credit, but rather pwede siyang tawagin as either a donation or a gift. Take note, sa credit, dapat merong promise to pay. Kasi, Kung ikaw, si borrower, na-obtain mo yung goods at na-obtain mo yung service at hindi ka magbabayad, para sa'yo, hindi yon credit, but rather donation yon sa'yo at gift yon sa'yo. It is no longer called as credit, but rather a donation or a gift. I have already given the meaning of credit in its easiest and simplest definition, and I have also given the meaning of credit in business. Now, there is a more appropriate definition of credit, and it is provided below. Credit is defined as a transaction involving the transfer of goods, services, funds, property, or rights, thereby creating an obligation on the part of those who receive them that must be complied with in the future. Observe that this definition is almost similar to the easiest and simplest definition. Parang pareho lang siya dun sa naunang definition. But in this definition, mas marami kasi yung items na binigay. May goods, services, funds, property, or rights. Dun sa first definition, meron lang cash, goods, or services. Pero, both definitions have transaction and arrangement. Transaction is synonymous to arrangement. At both definitions merong obligation to pay or obligation to comply. This definition indicates an exchange between two parties. Meron daw two parties sa credit. At dahil two parties yan, of course, meron tayong first party at second party. Pero walang third party. Ang meron lang first party at second party. The first party provides the goods, services, funds, property, or a right. And on the other hand, the second party has the obligation to comply with his obligation by promising to pay for them in cash, in kind, or to return the thing borrowed. Of course, kung merong magbibigay ng goods, magre-render ng service, magbibigay ng funds, magbibigay ng property, at magta-transfer ng right, dapat meron ding isang party na merong obligation to comply or to pay. Yung first party, ang tawag sa kanya ay creditor, at yung second party, ang tawag sa kanya ay debtor. Creditor yung nagpautang at debtor yung umutang. Other synonymous terms are lender in lieu of creditor and borrower for debtor. In other words, pwedeng tawagin yung creditor as lender at pwedeng tawagin yung debtor as borrower. But take note of this, ordinary English usage would prefer one term to the other depending on the circumstances. Although synonymous ang lender at creditor at synonymous ang borrower at debtor, meron pa rin silang pinagkaiba. That is in accordance with the ordinary English usage. For example, a person providing a cash loan could be called either a lender or creditor, but a person who lends a hammer for temporary use by a neighbor could not appropriately be called a creditor, but is properly referred to as the lender of a personal property. And a person allowed to use a friend's jeep could simply not be referred to as a debtor, but as a borrower. Kung umutang ka ng cash, pwede kang tawagin as borrower or debtor. At pag nagpautang ka ng cash, pwede kang tawagin as lender or creditor. Pero kung nagpahiram ka lang naman ng hammer that is for temporary use by a neighbor, hindi ka pwedeng tawagin. It is not appropriate na tawagin ka as creditor but rather a lender. Kung pinahiram sa iyo yung sasakyan ng kaibigan mo, you are not properly called as a debtor, but rather a borrower. Kasi nanghiram ka lang naman ng sasakyan. Kung ikaw ay nagpahiram sa kaibigan mo ng sasakyan, you are not properly called as creditor, but rather a lender. Let us now proceed to the 5 items that are provided by the lender or creditor. The 5 items that are provided by the lender or creditor in the more appropriate definition of credit are more or less very commonly encountered by ordinary individuals. Remember, doon sa more appropriate definition, merong 5 items. Yung first item ay goods, second item ay services, third item ay funds, fourth item, property, and fifth item ay rights. Ito yung mga items na binigay sa more appropriate definition of credit. Ang mga examples ng goods ay groceries, appliances, medicines, and hardware. Kasi kapag sinabing goods, tangible products itong mga to. Kapag sinabing tangible, nahahawakan at nakikita. Meaning to say, merong physical substance. Or merong physical characteristics. Ang examples naman ng services ay car repair, beauty parlor services, and electrical current. The difference between goods and services is that goods are tangible and services are intangible. Meaning to say, ang services, hindi yan nakikita at hindi nahahawakan. Walang physical attributes ang services. Hindi mo nakikita ang car repair, hindi mo nakikita ang beauty parlor services, hindi mo nahahawakan, and of course, the electrical current, wala din siyang physical substance. Hindi mo nakikita at hindi mo nahahawakan. That is a service. But take note that both goods and services are products. Sa marketing kasi, ang goods at services ay products. Ang products nahatian sa dalawa, yung goods at services. Goods ay tangible at services ay intangible. Ang examples naman ng funds ay cash loan from a pawn shop, bank, or a friend. How about the property? Ang example nito ay a hammer for temporary use by a neighbor, a car for personal use, and a beach house for use for a weekend. Ang very good example naman ng rights ay possession or use of a commercial store space. For the 5 items, whenever a credit transaction is created by virtue of an agreement, the terms used for the providers of the goods, services, funds, property, or rights, and the users would certainly vary. Meaning to say, magkakaiba ang tawag sa parties, sa credit, depende kung ano ang items. In items number 1 and 2, a creditor-debtor relationship is created. Yung items number 1 and 2 ay goods and services. For items number 1 and 2, a creditor-debtor relationship is created. Since a creditor-debtor relationship is created, merong dalawang parties na involved. Ang tawag sa kanila ay debtor at creditor. Yung recipient or user or receiver of services ay tinatawag na debtor at yung nag-provide naman ng goods at services ay tinatawag na creditor. How about sa item number 3, funds? Since ang example sa funds ay cash loan from a pawn shop, bank, or a friend, ang mga parties na involved dito ay tinatawag na lender and borrower. Yung lender ang nagpautang ng cash at yung borrower ang umutang ng cash. How about sa item number 4? Ang item number 4 ay property. In item number 4, the owner of the personal or real property being lent by the owner or possessor is called the bailor, and the borrower, the bailee. In other words, the owner is called the bailor, and the borrower is called the bailee. That is for item number 4. How about for item number 5? Ang item number 5 ay rights. Anong tawag dun sa dalawang parties when it comes to rights? In item number 5, the parties are called the lessor and the lessee. The lessor is the one who owns the commercial store for rent, and the lessee is the one who rents it. Therefore, ang owner ay tinatawag na lessor at yung humiram tinatawag na lessee. Or yung nag-rent ng commercial store ay tinatawag na lessee. Observe that there are different terms used for the parties involved depending on the items. Let us now proceed to what is a sale. Ano nga bang ibig sabihin ng sale? But before answering the question, what is a sale? Let us first know the distinction between ownership and possession. Meaning to say, let us first know the difference between ownership and possession. Ano nga ba ang pinagkaiba ng ownership sa possession? Ownership is the legal title to a property or a right, while possession is the physical control of a property or a right. Let me give you an example in order for you to better understand ownership and possession. For example, the owner of a farm in Ipil, Zamboanga, Sibugay could be Mr. X, who resides in Cebu, and the possessor is Mr. Y, a farmer who resides there and uses it for rice and vegetable farming. In this example, makikita ninyo na ang owner at possessor ay magkaibang tao. Si X ang owner kasi siya ang merong legal title doon sa farm. At si Mr. Y ang possessor kasi siya ang merong physical control doon sa farm. Kasi ginagamit niya yung farm for rice and vegetable farming. So here you can say that just because you're the owner doesn't mean you're the possessor. Hindi ibig sabihin na ikaw yung owner ay ikaw na rin yung possessor. Remember, pag sinabing possessor, dapat may physical control ka dun sa mismong property or right. Kung ikaw ay meron lang legal title, ang tawag sa iyo ay owner. Again, pag sinabing ownership, legal title. Pag sinabing possession, physical control. That is the distinction between ownership and possession. Let us now answer the question, what is a sale? The definition of sale can be found in Article 1458 of the Civil Code of the Philippines. Article 1458 of the Civil Code of the Philippines states that by the contract of sale, one of the contracting parties obligates himself to transfer the ownership of goods or services and to deliver a determinate thing, and the other to pay, therefore, a price certain in money or its equivalent. In credit, merong transfer of goods or services. Ganon din sa sale, meron ding transfer of the ownership of goods or services. It also states here in the definition that a sale is a contract. Pag sinabing contract, may meeting of minds. May agreement between two parties. And of course, sa sale, ang tawag dun sa dalawang parties ay vendor at vendee or seller or buyer. Seller, buyer, vendor, vendee. In a sale, whether on a credit arrangement or not, it is the intention of the parties that both the ownership and possession of goods or services be transferred to the buyer who must pay for them. That means sa sale, whether in cash or on credit, yung ownership at possession ng goods at services ay dapat matransfer sa buyer. Evident naman sa Article 1458 yung transfer of ownership, sabi sa definition, to transfer the ownership of goods or services. At yung transfer of the possession, makikita din doon sa definition sa Article 1458. Ang sabi, to deliver. Kasi kapag dineliver yung goods or services, there is a transfer of possession. Delivery refers to the transfer of possession. Ang tatandaan nyo dito, always remember that in a sale, both the ownership and the possession of the goods and services must be transferred to the buyer. In a sale, there are two parties involved. Of course, yung mga parties na involved dito ay una, vendor or seller. At yung pangalawa, vendee or buyer. Ang obligation ni vendor is to deliver a determinate thing. Kasi nga siya ang nagbebenta. That's why he has to deliver that determinate thing. Si buyer naman, ang kanyang obligation, ang obligation ni vendee or buyer is to pay. Pwede siyang magbayad ngayon at the time of sale or pwede siyang magbayad in the future. If the buyer or vendee pays now, the buyer's obligation is fully complied with and extinguished, and there is no credit transaction. If at the time of sale, nagbayad na ang buyer or vendee, walang mangyayaring credit transaction. Kasi nga, di ba, ang ibig sabihin ng credit is that you have to pay for the goods or services in the future. E kung magbabayad na siya ngayon, walang mangyayaring credit transaction. At kung magbabayad siya ngayon, there is no future obligation para magbayad pa ulit. That's why sabi dito, the obligation is fully complied with and extinguished. Ang ibig sabihin ng extinguished ay ended or finished. Tapos na ang obligation ni buyer or vendee. But if he promises to pay in the future, the obligation will remain outstanding until fully paid. By promising to pay later, a credit obligation arises. Ang obligation ni buyer or vendee is to pay. Pwede siyang magbayad at the time of sale or pwede siyang magbayad after the sale. Kung magbabayad siya in the future or magbabayad siya after the sale, may credit transaction na mangyayari. Kasi di ba sa credit, babayaran yung goods or services in the future. At dahil babayaran ng buyer or vendee ang goods or services na natanggap niya in the future, that means hindi pa tapos ang obligation ni buyer or seller. That's why the obligation will remain outstanding until fully paid. Again, the obligation of vendor is to deliver a determinate thing. And the obligation of the vendee or buyer is to pay a price certain in money or its equivalent.